Bava Batra Daf Kuf Mem Daled Amud Bet, Inputs of Economic Prosperity, Birckat Habeit Bרובה. This learning today, this shir today, is a gift to the Jewish people from Rav Huna in the 3rd century, from Rashi and the Rashbam in the 11th and the 12th century. Just distribute it to everybody you know, because this is a shir that can change people's lives. And in 20 minutes in Yirtzeh Hashem, we will understand the foundations of the Jewish economic system. What is it all about? What is unique about our economics? What is unique about the way we view the world in a financial and an economic way? Generally, we tend to value those economic inputs that are tangible: capital, labor. We look at efficiency, we look at synergies to create economies of scale. These are all things we can measure. But birkat Hashem, to understand that there's an economic input called birkat Hashem, the blessings of Hashem, which although not always tangible, not always measurable, is actually visible. And by ignoring that as an economic input, one doesn't understand economics. And we'll understand in this learning, we'll see how a proper understanding of birkat Hashem, of how that works to some degree, as much as we're able to understand, gives us a different way of making economic decisions, of making economic projections, and of engaging with the world economically. Tanu Rabbanon, we learned in the Braisa, Echad min ha'achim shenatal 200 zuz lilmod Torah or lilmod umanut. So you've got brothers who are shareholders in a common business. They inherited a business from their father, they inherited an asset, and they're in the business together. One decides he wants to go to yeshiva, or he wants to learn a trade, he wants to go to college, and he takes 200 zuz out of the estate, and he says, I'm off to develop myself first before I get back into the business. Yicholin ha'achim lomar, im ata etzleinu yesh lecha mezonot. As long as you're with us in the business and you're here working with us, you can draw money every month or every day from the business. But if you're off to do your own thing, you can't draw from the business. Ask the Gemara, but he's a shareholder. What difference does it matter where he is? He's a part owner of the business. Let him draw his dividends wherever he is in the world. Messiah Leile Rav Huna. This supports the view of Rav Huna. Ta'amar Rav Huna, birkat habayit bרובה. This is the foundation of the Jewish economic system. The bracha of a home is in the number of people that are in it. There is a bracha in quantity of people. Because Rav Huna understands that people are not an economic cost. People are not viewed as consumers of resources. People are viewed as generators of resourcefulness. And the difference between people as consumers and people as a resource is the difference between a Jewish perspective and a non-Jewish perspective. Malthus back in the 18th century predicted famine in England because he calculated, absolutely scientifically, that the island didn't have the space to be able to produce enough food for the growing population. He was right, except he didn't think about human resourcefulness. The Industrial Revolution came and turned all his predictions on their heads. And how long have we been hearing for economists since then, down to the present day, even to that silly little girl, what's her name? Greta Thunberg. How often do we hear about the planet's in distress, and we're not going to have enough food, and there isn't enough resource, and there won't be enough oil, and there won't be enough this, and there won't be enough that? How long have we heard that? That's if people are consumers of resources. And look what China did to try and control its population, and now it's facing economic decline because of a declining population. And Japan is just about destroyed because of economic decline, because of population decline. And Europe is being destroyed because of economic decline caused by population decline. And the whole world, this is one of Elon Musk's big concerns, that the world is in for unbelievable decline, not because we've got too many people, because we've got too few people. Because we're not growing. He understands humans are resources. Look what he, as one human, has been able to do for prosperity. Now imagine you had 8 billion Elon Musks, and why shouldn't you have 8 billion Elon Musks in some form or another? Just because we see people as consumers of resources, not as generators of resourcefulness. And Rav Huna teachers understand that the brocha comes from the more people you have, not the less. And that's why Jewish people have big families and they don't worry about the economics. And that's why we build communities. And that's why we build we build organizations and we build businesses, because we understand the resourcefulness of a human being. And that's why every Jew wants to be a contributor, wants to make a difference, wants to add value. That's the essence of being Jewish, rather than one of entitlement and consumption. And who better than Rav Huna should know that? Rav Huna started off as a very poor person. He became the Rosh Yeshiva of Surah. He was the Talmud of Rav and Shmuel. He used to give massive shiurim. He would have 800 people in his shiurim. We think it's only today that people are giving big shiurim. He didn't have the internet. He didn't have YouTube. He just gave a shiur. But in his shiur, there were over 800 people every single day. Rav Huna was so great, and he lived in poverty in the first period of his career, until he actually had to pawn his belt to be able to afford wine for Kiddush. He had to sell his belt to a pawn shop. And his Rebbe, Rav, heard about that and was so upset. He came to Rav Huna and he gave him a brocha that he should wear clothes of silk. And later on, Rav Huna became wealthy. And so Rav Huna knew well what it is, what a birkas habayis is. He knew well what it is to develop economic prosperity through brocha, and to understand birkas Hashem as an element of it. Ask the Gemara, v'leit v'leilefi birkas habayis. Okay, I understand. So they can figure out that if he were there, yes, he consumes some resources from the house, but he's also a generator of resources. So calculate his net gain in the house, what he contributes to the household, deduct that from his dividends, and give him the balance, give him the rest. No, says the Gemara, that's not possible. Says the Gemara, yeah, you can do that. That's possible. We're not saying you shouldn't do that. What does birkas habayis mean? Says the Rashbam, she'ilu hayadari mahem haya habayit mitbarech biglalo. If he would have lived there, they claim, it's all very well you going off to yeshiva, but we don't have you in our house. That means there's less brocha in our house, because that's a Jewish view. It's not one mouth less to feed. Thanks, go to yeshiva, let them worry about you. No, if you're not here, there's one less resource. There's one less contributor. There's one less brain. There's one less capacity to draw brocha into the house, because human beings are connected to Shamayim and they are channels of brocha. We bring brocha to our environment. We bring brocha to our homes, to our families, to our friends, to our communities. That's what people do. We're connected to the source of brocha. And that's not there anymore. Says the Ran, it's not a question of some mystical kind of brocha. It's a matter of synergy. They work together, and as a result of that, there's mazala de Rabbi Madif. The more people there are, the more synergy there is, and the more synergy there is, the more economic prosperity there is. It says Rabbeinu Chananel, it's not about synergy in Tosfos. It says Rabbeinu Chananel, it's about efficiency. That you've got economies of scale. If you've got more people, you've got economies of scale. And Tosfos says that makes sense, because according to the Rashbam, how can they talk about give him the amount of the brocha? How do you calculate brocha if it's just an ethereal brocha? According to the Ran, and according to the Rabbeinu Chananel, you can measure it. This is something real. This is an economic element, and you can measure it. So that makes sense. No, says Rabbeinu Tam. It's interesting, this conversation between Rashi and his grandchildren. No, says Rabbeinu Tam, you can measure this as well by doing comparisons with previous years. When he was there was X amount of revenue. Once he left, there was Y amount of revenue. So Y minus X is how much he contributed. You can calculate that. Says Ri, there's no way you can calculate that. There are other factors that go into the generation of wealth and growth. There could be climate, and there could be trends in the economy, and who knows what they could be. Inflation and deflation, all sorts of things could affect it. You can't attribute it to his being there. So that's the conversation that Tosfos holds, and it would seem from what Ri ends off saying is that we can't really accept the Rashbam, because according to the Rashbam, yes, it's all very well to say people add to the brocha of a household, but the Gemara seems to assume there's a way to measure it. And if we're talking about birkas Hashem, how do you measure that? So that doesn't seem to make any kind of sense at all. However, we have a Gemara in Kiddushin. The Gemara in Kiddushin talks about anaka. When a slave is let go, you've got to give the slave a parting present. And the Gemara says there that if there has been brocha biglalo, if he has brought bracha into the house, in isbarech bait biglalo ma'anikim lo, if the house has done well because of the presence of the eved, then you should add to his. You don't just give him the minimum of 30 slaim that comes to him. You should give him more than that as well. And the Rambam paskins that lahalacha. Says Rashi, what is nitbarech habait bishvilo habe? That means just because of him, the house has done better. Tosif ala anacho v'im lav al tifchot min hakatuv. You give him the minimum amount. But if there's been bracha because of his presence, you add. So how do you know how much bracha there's been? How do you know if it's because of him or it's because of other economic factors? So you see from there is a way to know it. And that's a kasha that Rabbi Chonon Wasserman asks on Tosfos. There's a Rabbi Chonon Wasserman that I found is brought in a sefer called Chazon Yeshayahu. I don't think this Rabbi Chonon is printed anywhere else. The Chazon Yeshayahu is a collection of unprinted chidushim of Gedolei Yisrael in later times, the time of Rabbi Chonon and others that have not been printed before on the 8th and 9th Perek of Bava Batra. It's a very interesting collection of Divrei Torah and Shiurim. And one of the things is a note by Rabbi Chonon Wasserman on this Tosfos. How can you say you can't measure it? You see in Kiddushin, the same thing we see in Gemara Bava Batra. We see that you have to be able to measure it in order to know how much to give the Eved. And the Rabbi Chonon goes on to say, and in fact we see with Yosef, he says, okay, Yosef, I understand. The Torah tells us, Yosef Hashem et Beit HaMitzri, that Hashem blessed Potiphar because of Yosef's presence. But that's because the Torah told us. But according to Tosfos, how would you normally know that would be the case? If you have to be able to measure it, how would you know? In a situation of Hanaka. So we see, if you extrapolate from Rabbi Chonon, what he's saying is, you see there is a way to know. Even if you can't measure it, there is a way to know. And it's interesting because there was a bank, a very large bank that I was consulting to for many years, and there was one leader of a particular part of the bank who never used us. And I used to ask him why. He was a very, very brilliant person. And he just said, I don't believe in it. I don't think you add anything. I don't think you do anything. I just don't buy into it. One day he calls me and it's in a panic. And he says, can you come and see us? I come, he says, look, I don't know whether you have some kind of wisdom. I don't know whether you have some technique, or I don't know whether you just say a blessing when you come. But I've done a study. And the only common denominator I can find of all the parts of the bank that have exceeded all expectations is they've used you. That's all I know, and we're in trouble. So do me a favor, come, do what you do, send me the bill, and go home. And when I thought about it, the truth is, I don't know either. Do I know whether it's because I daven for my clients? I want them to succeed. Is it the tefillah or is it the eitzah? Who knows? Or is it a combination that as Yosef, the first consultant in history, tells Paro, it's not from me, it's from Hashem. So when a consultant or when a counselor gives counsel and includes tefillah with that, includes prayer, he understands it comes from Hashem, not from him. Maybe that's the ideal counsel. Whenever anybody asks me for counsel, whether it's in the rabbinic world or in the business world, it's always with tefillah for the success of that person. And is it the combination of the two? Is it the one or is it the other? One doesn't know, but this non-Jewish client taught me what we see in the psukim, because if you look at the psukim carefully that Rabbi Chonon quotes, you actually see how it works. The Torah tells us Yosef goes to Mitzrayim and Potiphar buys him eventually. And then he goes to Potiphar, and Vayihi Hashem et Yosef Vayihi ish matzliach. Hashem is with Yosef and he becomes a successful person. And he's in the house of the Mitzri. So it's his success. He is a successful person. But look what it says. Vayar Adonav, Potiphar, an Egyptian. Ki Hashem ito. He could see Hashem is with this man. V'chol asher hu oseh matzliach biyado. Vayimatzeh Yosef chen be'einav vayisharto, vayifkedehu al beito. And he appoints him to his house. So you would say to Potiphar, what kind of experience does this man that you've just pulled out, bought from some trader of slaves from some foreign land, have you checked his credentials? What's his resume? What's his experience in your business? He's got no experience in my business. What's his experience in any business? He has no experience in any business. Does he understand finance? No, I don't know that he understands. I don't know what he understands. All I know is that he's an ish matzliach, that Hashem ito. I can see God is with him. How do you measure that? You see, you don't have to measure it to see. We think you can only see things that you can measure, that you can only see things that are tangible. No, there are things that are tangible. There are things that are measurable. And there are things that you can see but don't have to be measured because they're obvious. You can see things. When you go to measurement, it's because you can't see. So I've got to have a measure. How much is it? I remember there was an American tourist on the tour with us at Versailles, and he was trying to understand the value of all the art he'd seen and everything in the Palace of Versailles, and he asked the guide, how much does the place cost? And she said, it's not for sale. He said, everything's for sale. And I just said to the guy, she was so astonished, and I said to her, she was a French girl, I said, don't worry, he just has no other way of valuing. He's an American. He has no other way of valuing other than he needs a measurement. How much? Is it 100 million? Is it 5? Give him a number. It doesn't matter. Billion, a million, billion. Give him whatever you want. He needs a number. Without a number, he can't understand value. An American. But one needs to understand that you can see value. Sometimes you don't need value. Sometimes they're not all Americans, just an American. Sometimes you can see value. Sometimes you can see value and you don't need a measurement. That was Potiphar. I don't need to measure this. I don't need to see a degree. I don't need to see if he's got a PhD. I don't need to know what college he's got. I can see. My eyes. I don't need anything more. And he points him on his household based on what he saw. Vayevarech Hashem et Beit HaMitzri biglal Yosef. And here comes the posik that Bilchonen brings. Yes, it is. You see from here that it can be because of an employee that the Rebbeinu Shem brings bracha on the entire business. How do you see that? Can you measure it? No, as Rabbi Lapin says, you can't measure it. So if Tosfos wants to measure everything, and the discussion between Rabbeinu Tam and Ri and Rabbeinu Chananel is all about whether or not you can measure it. No, says we can see clearly based on this that that's what the Rashba means. You don't have to be able to measure it to be able to see it, and that's why the Gemara in Kiddushin and the Rambam say with Hanakah, you don't need to be able to measure. You can tell if your household has been blessed because of this Eved or not. Are there other factors? Yes, but maybe the other factors came about because of him. What you know is when he came, things got better. When he leaves, things get worse. You realize there's a correlation between his presence and between Hashem. And we need to develop this ability to see birkas Hashem in our lives. We've got to do it, firstly, to be able to enjoy and understand birkas Hashem, but more than that, when the Pasuk says in Shemos, when the Bnei Yisrael are scared of Har Sinai and of God came, and they say to Moshe, you speak to Hashem, we're scared. And Hashem says, don't worry, because Hashem brought this in. Hitiv lachem ha'elokim laharotchem et kvodo asher lo asa lechem l'chol goy lenasotchem, says the Ramban, to try you. Im tigmelu lefanav ketova asher asa imachem liyot lolam nachala. Hashem is testing you with gifts. Because, says the Ramban, as the first part of the Mesilas Yesharim, and like Talmud of the Mesilas Yesharim, he develops the idea, we're being tested with goodness and we're tested with hardship. Hardship being tested, our belief, our emunah is being tested. But when we're tested with prosperity, our hakaras hatov is being tested. And that's even harder. Do we have the midah of hakarat hatov, which we've said before, based on the whole structure of the Chovat HaLvavot, that hakarat hatov, gratitude, is the foundation of all avodas Hashem. And Hashem tests us with kindness. He gives us health, He gives us family, He gives us well-being, He gives us all the different senses that we've got, He gives us life experiences that we've got, He gives us pleasure and happiness and joy. Why? To test us in hakaras hatov, to give us the opportunity to develop our midah of hakaras hatov. But if you can't see birkas Hashem, if everything has to be measured, then you'll always have another reason. Why did you do well this year? The markets were good to me. The markets were good to you? And what about the Ribono Shel Olam? Did you make some money on your house? I did. I sold the house. Baruch Hashem. The market went up. The property market's doing well. How often do we use those words? I lost money because the markets went down. What can I do? These things happen. How often do we use those words? It's avodah zarah. Not to understand birkas Hashem. This is all from Hashem, not to be able to see the... Even Potiphar could see it. And we, Jews living in Eretz Yisrael, can't see the birkas Hashem? That's the nisayon. The nisayon is just look around us at Eretz Yisrael. Can we not see the birkas Hashem? And to realize that we need a hakarat hatov for that, that's what we're being tested for. Omer Rav Huna, birkas habayis bרובה. The more human beings there are, not only adding their resourcefulness, but adding their tefillah, adding their hakarat hatov, adding their gratitude to Hashem. The more people you have in a community, in a country, in a home, in a business, showing hakarat atov to Hashem, showing gratitude to Hashem, and therefore also to one another. Because if you've got gratitude to Hashem, you show gratitude to everybody. People who can see prosperity, people who can see bracha, they don't have to measure everything. There can be bracha that isn't measurable, but it's obvious. It's not measurable because it doesn't need to be measurable. And we've got to train ourselves counter to the trend of the Western world in which we live, that not only that which is measurable is visible. We've got to develop the eyes to see that which is not tangible, to hear that which is not heard, to see that which is not obvious, and to be able to see the subtle and understand the Yad Hashem and the birkas Hashem behind every blessing that we have every moment of our lives.